Peace be with you. This is Catholic Sports Radio, located at the intersection of your faith life and sports life, and on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and lots of other platforms. I am Bruce Wozniak, talking with Catholic guests who are current or former athletes, coaches, referees, umpires, clergy, administrators, and more from the pro, amateur, and scholastic ranks about the intersection of their faith life and their sports life. The show website is catholicsportsradio.net. There are links there not only to 4 social media platforms, but the Facebook group as well, where you can interact with not only other listeners, but even some past guests from this show. Always feel free to get in touch with me personally. You can email me via bruce@catholicsportsradio.net, or even private message me through the Facebook page or the Instagram account. I love hearing from listeners of this show, so by all means, please feel welcome to use any of those methods to reach me. Now on to my ministry moment for this episode. Betting has really gotten a strong foothold on sports, to the point where the 4 major sports have sought out how to accept it and even let some of the wagering platforms enter in through sponsorships. As far back as the Black Sox scandal in the early 1900s, there is always a fear of something no one likes to acknowledge in sports, meaning temptations to cheat. When something like betting comes into play, you hear stories of compromising the integrity of the game. In fact, way back on episode 6 of this show, Jim Sweeney talked about standing strong during the Boston College men's basketball point shaving scandal, sticking to his moral roots and not taking a bribe, as was featured in an ESPN 30 for 30 called Playing for the Mob. During a morning meditation just under 7 years ago, Pope Francis said, quote, "Corruption is an easier sin for all of us who have certain power, be it ecclesiastical, religious, economic, or political power. The devil makes us feel secure. I can do it." I would like to stress only this. There is a moment when the tendency to sin, or a moment when our situation is really secure and we seem to be blessed. We have a lot of power, money, a lot of things. Sin stops being sin and becomes corruption. The Lord always forgives, but one of the worst things about corruption is that a corrupt person doesn't need to ask for forgiveness. He doesn't feel the need. End quote. Moving on now with this week's episode, my guest has been in various roles in sports throughout his life. In his childhood, he played CYO basketball and Little League baseball. In high school, he played intramural softball and has also played in softball leagues in his adult life. He also coached CYO basketball in the past and nowadays helps coach his daughter's baseball league. He also had a long history as a sports writer for a newspaper in Queens and had been the assistant sports editor for St. John's University. He is the author not only of a book from 2.5 years ago called Dreams Come True, Discovering God's Vision for Your Life, but more recently, a second book that just came out this past April titled Batter Up, Answering the Call of Faith and Fatherhood. Welcome to Catholic Sports Radio, Dr. Jimmy Walters.
Thank you so much, Bruce, for having me on, and really happy to be here.
Absolutely, yes. Looking forward to it, Jimmy. Thank you. I'm going to use context clues and guess from some of what I just read in the intro that you are from New York, but set the record straight for us. Where were you born, and what was the family size, and are you a cradle Catholic?
I am. So I grew up in Queens, New York my whole life. I moved a couple years ago out to Long Island. I grew up in Ozone Park, Queens. My parish, Nativity Blessed Virgin Mary, and was part of that for all my whole childhood and young adult life. 2 parents, a twin sister. My dad was an electrician. My mom worked for the local politician and helped take care of us at school. My dad was the baseball coach, basketball coach, as well as some other great guys who helped shape me. I went to St. Francis Prep High School, which a lot of athletes have come from there, especially when I was in Brooklyn before I moved to Queens. So sports has always been part of my life, and certainly my faith is a part of who I am.
It's interesting that I picked up in there that you mentioned that your dad did some coaching, because I'm always interested who might have influenced a guest to get involved in sports at a young age. And in the intro, I read off a good deal of sports participation from your childhood, your teen years, playing basketball, baseball, softball. Mm-hmm. What did sports represent for you growing up?
Yeah, so I always loved watching sports, playing sports. I don't know if God gave me the most talent in terms of playing sports, but then he did give me the talent to be able to write about it, which I know we'll talk about later. At a young age, it was community. It was, my friends played and I wanted to spend time with them, and we always tried to do better. I can remember when I was struggling playing baseball as it became a little bit more competitive, and my dad was like, he set up a baseball in the basement hanging from a string just to try to get the level swing with like a tennis ball, And he was like, if you really want to commit to this and try to pursue this professionally and everything, and there was no chance that was ever going to happen, right? But he just believed in it, And I think those type of messages that are sent through actions like that, help shape me as a person. And certainly I try to do that now as a father and when I coach as well. And I even think in basketball, I had a coach, his name's Ralph, Coach Ralph, and he took me under his wing, and I was a really quiet kid, and a lot of my friends were on the A-level team, and I had no business being on that team. But he just saw something in me, and, I would practice every day after school and just tried so hard, and he gave me opportunities to play, and I don't know if, certainly I made improvements in basketball. I never maybe hit the mark that I wanted to, but I definitely developed a lot of other characteristics and grew as a person at a really young age. And as like my dad, like with Coach Ralph, it's that sense of somebody believing in you and someone spending that time to invest in you that stays with you for the rest of your life.
But there's something that you said in there that I want to go back to, because I wonder, and I know that you have the background to give us a very perceptive answer to what I'm about to say, but you said that your father said, this is what you have to be able to do if you want to be a professional, meaning baseball player. Is that healthy for a father, for a parent to say to their child, or is it too much pressure too young, or is it, oh gosh, the intent is just to show how hard you have to work? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I was maybe 12 years old at the time, 11, 12, so I was older. So I don't know if that would have worked when I was 6 or 7. But at that age, it was a moment of crossroads. If I'm going to pursue this is the work that's going to have to go into it. Right? The same way he would have said that with my schoolwork. Right? When I went to high school and they put me in a Catholic school and it wasn't cheap. And I remember that after that first month, I was struggling because it was such a big school. And I came from this small little Catholic school for the first 8 years of my life. And it was the same conversation. It was like, if you want to stay in this school, this is the work that you're going to have to do. But at the same time, he said, if you want to go to a smaller school, we'll figure that out. And I think that's the balance of how you, especially now as a parent, how you know who your kid is, and you understand a little bit how they tick. And then at some point, putting it all in front of them to say, okay, if this is a path you want to pursue, I'm going to support you every way I can, but you have to match that in effort and match that in commitment. That would not be appropriate for a younger child. But I think as you get a little bit older, I think that's a part of the conversation that you have to have, and I'm grateful for that. But I also have to say it depends on the kid. Like I was a very, and I still am, very sensitive. I tend to feel things deeply, very empathetic. So I was able to hear that from the love. It came from a place of love. It wasn't any pressure. Like when I said, no, I'm not going to pursue a career in playing baseball or try to pursue that career, there was no disappointment. There was no sense of pressure that I felt from my dad or anybody else. I think that's really important as well, that you, especially when you're mentoring and trying to develop younger people, you're approaching it with unconditional love and acceptance. So my father wasn't living his baseball dreams through me, right? So it was more of like, how can I best support you?
Yeah, I like that. And I like that you made the distinction for us about age, that, okay, I was 12. It's not a case of, come on, give me a break. I'm just 6 here. Like, let's not take this a little too seriously.
Yeah.
I had mentioned that you were the assistant sports editor for St. John's, which is a Catholic university. I'm assuming that role must have been while you were a student. Talk about the importance of being surrounded each day on a campus by the Catholic faith, how helpful that was to your commitment to staying devoted to God.
Oh, my goodness. It changed my life.
Wow.
I always knew I was going to St. John's. I drove by. I used to drive on Union Turnpike. People familiar with the area would know, going to St. Francis Prep, and I would pass St. John's every day, and I just knew I was going there. It just was a sense of, like, I felt that inner calling. I didn't want to go away to school, and going to Catholic school was important. It was always a part of my life. At that age, like as a junior, senior in high school, when you're making those decisions, it wasn't like the most important thing, but I knew I was comfortable there. I knew I would have opportunities to do community service, which was really important to me at that time. It still is. And it just became kind of a natural piece. I also remember as a high school senior going to the open house at St. John's, and I went to the sports writing area and the sports journalism area, and they were talking about Mike and the Mad Dog, which is the famous sports announcers that really were trailblazers in sports broadcasting. And Mike Francesco went to St. John's. So there was that little bit of a connection of, this is a really cool place to go. And I had a chance to meet him a couple times at the university when I was a student. And then going there, I got involved in my faith life pretty quickly. But when I was a sophomore, it was September 11th, 2001. And I actually, missed everything that happened from when the first tower was hit to when both towers fell. I was in class the whole time. And there are some windows that overlook to the skyline of Manhattan in some of the buildings. I was not. I was on the other side. And this is the time before like the smartphones that we have now or laptops. So I didn't know anything.
Wow. And
when class ended, somebody came running in saying school's closed, something happened in Manhattan. Everyone's cell phones went out because it was the signal couldn't handle it, the overload.
Wow.
And it wasn't until I found my sister and my friend who we carpooled together that we got to the car, put on the radio, and then we knew what happened. And we were only a few miles away. It's not too far from where we were.
Wow.
But it was that campus, that faith life that really helped me at that point. I remember on that Friday night, I went to the chapel on campus, and they had a candlelight vigil. And it was one of those few moments where I really needed my faith at that age, where I probably haven't had to tap into it yet. I was, again, very blessed with a blessed life. But it was that moment I was scared. I didn't know what to expect. And I prayed in a different way. And it felt like life insurance or car insurance, car insurance, like something you tap into now when you need it. And my faith meant something in a very deep way. And there were incredible campus ministers who are still dear mentors and friends who guided me and helped me grow my relationship with Christ. And
wow.
It led me to a life of being in ministry. Only until recently I worked in campus ministry at St. John's. So it was a life-changing experience, and that St. John's community is such a big part of it. And it's not just the relationship with Christ through prayer, but it's through service. And it's a Vincentian school founded by the Congregation of the Mission, who follows the St. Vincent de Paul. So there's that real sense of putting your service into action and finding Christ in the poor. And I'm blessed to be a part of that Vincentian network. And now I work with the Sisters of Charity Federation, who's also a part of the Vincentian family. So, yeah, everything is so much of my life where it is right now at St. John's my life is right now at St. John's, and now with the Sisters. It really, in many ways, had that crossroad at St. John's University as a sophomore.
So powerful, so powerful. We were talking about St. John's because of my having mentioned that you were the assistant sports editor. Doing that afforded you the opportunity to rub elbows with some baseball greats. Share with us about those experiences.
Yeah, just a little backstory to it. As I was writing for St. John's, I also wrote for, as you said in the introduction, another Queens newspaper, and I had a chance to get a press pass with the Mets, which was great, and that one allowed me one day to go, and I went to the on the field beforehand, and Tom Seaver was standing there, and I was so starstruck I couldn't even approach him. And then I went inside and I saw Bob Murphy and Howie Rose, these great broadcasters of the Mets, sitting there doing all their preparation for the game, and that was like a big moment for me as just as a sports fan and sports writer, to be surrounded by these people. But another really cool story, when I was a senior in high school, and even after that, I had a connection to Jay Torrey, who his sister, she had two sisters, but one sister, Marguerite Torrey, was an Ursuline sister who was the principal in my grammar school. and very close to her. She recently passed this past year. Thank God, had a chance to speak on the phone about 2 months before she passed away. Just a beautiful person, and really cared for me. When I was in 7th grade, that's the year we received confirmation, I had the chicken pox 1 week before confirmation. And I was so sad that I was not going to be able to receive with my class. But I was able to. At that point, I didn't feel like it. And you know how nice she was? She sent home with my sister a baseball that was signed by the 1995 St. Louis Cardinals.
Wow.
And it had Ozzie Smith on it, so many other people, because Joe Torre used to be a manager with the Cardinals.
Yeah.
So it was like, here you are, like this 12-year-old kid, and you have this baseball with a whole team signature on it. So it was such a moment, and I think that just speaks to her generosity. But probably the greatest thing she did for me was when I was in prep at St. Francis Prep, she gave me a chance to interview Joe Torre for the school newspaper. And it was in the beginning of spring training, and it was just incredible to have a chance to speak with him and his generosity of time to speak to some high school students.
Yeah.
And it was great. And then in 1999, as a senior at St. Francis Prep, I got invited, because of my writing, because I wrote for the Queen's paper, a chance to go to Game 6 of the World Series between the Yankees and the Braves. And the Yankees would clinch that night. Roger Clemens would start. I would have different feelings about Roger Clemens the following year when he hit Mike Piazza in the head. But at that point, I had different feelings. But I did not like the Braves because they had just beat the Mets in the NLCS in a week before. And so anyway, I had a chance to go to that game. And for one inning, I had a chance to sit right behind the Braves dugout, which was incredible. And then after the game, so the Yankees win the World Series, and it's wonderful to be there for that and to see that. And it was the old Yankee Stadium, and so it was just crazy. And after the game, I'm expecting to go home, and Mr. Murphy says, no, we're all going to go to the managers, the coaches' party at a restaurant in Manhattan. And we had a whole group of about 8 people. And here we are, and we went into this van and drove into Manhattan and walk into this room, and there's all the Yankee coaches.
Wow.
Willie Randolph was there, I remember him.
Wow.
And Joe Torre sitting there with Billy Crystal, he was there.
Oh.
And it was just incredible. And I'm eating these, I joked that it was the biggest shrimp cocktail I ever saw in my life. And it was one I went over and wished some congratulations. And I think I got home 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I had school the next day. And that night was the Halloween party at my high school. And the rule at St. Francis was you couldn't go to a party or a school event if you missed school. So I just called the brother in the morning who was in charge of taking attendance. And I said, you're not going to believe this, so let me just tell you the truth. And he just appreciated the honesty. And he said, sleep as much as you can. Come to the party tonight. And I was just so grateful for that generosity and kindness. And so it was just a surreal experience, and just again, people being very kind. And I wrote this incredible article for that paper, a picture of me and Joe at the celebration for the Yankees winning the World Series. A part of that, really the last professional baseball dynasty that we might ever see because of the way the game is.
Wow. So fun. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Let's get back to talking about the academic realm. I'm curious, you have advanced degrees in instructional leadership, theology, and counseling, and an expertise in something that I'm interested for you to explain to us, which is appreciative inquiry and spirituality. Yeah,
so I'll talk more about the appreciative inquiry piece because that connects to my doctoral work and my research, and it has shaped my professional life and how I have tried to minister to students, certainly how I am as a father, and just relating to people. So the appreciative inquiry model was developed like in the 1980s for businesses. And the idea was that instead of looking at gaps or deficits, you look at strengths. So you look at a situation and say, well, what's working here? If you use a sports analogy, if you looked at a team, you would say, okay, what are the talents of each of my players? And then how do I maximize those strengths, those talents, instead of focusing on what's missing? And so when you look at my work with college students, for example, I would sit with them and look at their report card and see how they're doing. And then they might do really well in one subject. And I would want to ask into that and understand, well, why do they do well? Where's that interest? because that might be a way through prayer to connect to what God might be calling them to do. There's some gifts or talents there. There's something there. And so that's the spiritual infusion of saying, like, things that come easier to us, things that we do well that we love to do. Right? That's a key piece to it. Those are gifts from God. And so then how do we spend that time to focus on that and to develop that further? So personally speaking, I love to write, and that's something that I have some skill set with, but it's natural. I've had great training and formation in that. But then how do I continue to develop that and then use that to do God's work?
Yeah.
Right? So it's being able to kind of move from that identification of gifts to then part of the appreciative inquiry process is dreaming, saying, well, what could God be calling me to do with this? How could I use this to serve him? And then praying about that, and then putting it into action.
Okay.
And so I've used it certainly with college students, but with young adults, and in my own life. And now as a dad, I use it with my kids all the time, and trying to support them as they discover what God's calling them to do and who God's calling them to be, more importantly.
Yeah. Wow. Fascinating. Folks, if you heard episode 199 2 weeks ago with Amy Seago, who is in her 19th season at the helm of the track and field and cross-country programs at the College of Charleston up in South Carolina, at the end of our interview, you heard her say that she was going to make a gift to my Catholic Sports Radio ministry, and in fact she did. I exchanged emails with her to express my sincere gratitude to her, but I wanted to acknowledge her and that kind gesture publicly. Amy used the blue Donate to CSR button on CatholicSportsRadio.net, and in the process told me how much she enjoys and supports what I'm doing. Plus, of course, she helped me out as it relates to the various costs that I have in operating Catholic Sports Radio. If you've been listening for a while, you know that I do my best to report as many of those exact expenses over numerous episodes of this show as I can, so you understand what I'm up against and what I'm referring to when I talk about being challenged to face those various costs. Be reminded that this is what I said. It's a ministry for me. I honestly do not get any income from doing this, nor do I have any sponsors, which means that without folks like Amy Seago and other guests before her and other listeners, I have to try to find a way out of my own pocket to tackle all those bills as they come in for Catholic Sports Radio. If that idea just doesn't sit right with you, I ask you to consider maybe going to buymeacoffee.com/Bruce W. and saying, okay, Merry Christmas, Bruce, I'm buying you a cup of coffee or two. And remember, there's no shipping involved with that. It's not a sponsor. There's no coffee shop affiliated with this. Take a look at it, buymeacoffee.com/Bruce W. Otherwise, as part of your tithing, maybe in the spirit of the Christmas season, or perhaps even as a congratulations on my having hit the 200 episodes milestone last week, please consider supporting me and the work that I'm doing to impact the faith life of audience members, I'm going to say worldwide, by doing what Amy Seago did and going to CatholicSportsRadio.net and using the blue Donate to CSR button. It's fast, easy, secure, and you simply type in whatever amount you're comfortable giving, plus it will even let you include a note for me to see. Alternatively, as you've heard me mention in the past that some have opted to do, you can write to me via bruce@CatholicSportsRadio.net to request the information for sending me a check through the mail. Either way, it means a lot to me because it tells me that you are getting value from what I do through this ministry. And yes, it helps me pay the bills that I have for Catholic Sports Radio. Please know my sincere gratitude for listening to the show, for telling others about it, and for supporting the work that I do in my ongoing efforts to move more people closer to Christ through this ministry. Jimmy, just as the pandemic started, April 2020 specifically, you released a book called Dreams Come True, Discovering God's Vision for Your Life. Tell us about that, if you would.
Yeah, so I always felt like when you talk about vocations or ministry, I always felt like there was a book that had to be written. Like I didn't know what that was, and it took a while to figure that out. Part of that discovery was through rejection from different publishers and trying to narrow like what I was writing, why I was writing it. And then this book was born, and Dreams Come True really was born out of my work with college students at first. I taught up until this past year for over a decade, first-year college students, using that appreciative inquiry model. to look at issues of injustices or poverty or anything that we need to respond to in our society. And I asked them as 18-year-olds to use their gifts and talents to try to make a difference. And it involved research, it involved working together. It was a spirit of collaboration, and for their faith to be a part of that. And so that inspired this book. The first half of it is more spiritual in nature. I try to use different anecdotes from my own life and also from different spiritual figures, many of the great saints, and other mentors who helped shape me. And the second part of the book uses the stages or the steps from appreciative inquiry. So anybody could read it and follow the steps to try to transform their lives, to try to make a difference, not only for themselves, but for the community. And it came out right in really the heart of the beginning of COVID, when there was so much fear, there was so much unknown. And certainly for me, and I know for many others, it shook us. It forced us to look at our lives differently, to look at our priorities, what mattered more, as would always happen in a crisis, but certainly when this was unique, that it kind of shut us down for a while, and it gave us some space and time to reevaluate. And I always think of, St. Francis of Assisi is one of my favorite saints, and he had a time in his life after his attempt to be a great soldier to be quiet and to recover from his wounds, and he prayed, and it's where his life shifted. And he had to ask those questions that we all ask of, what is God calling me to do and to be? And that's what this book attempts to do. And some of the greatest compliments I have received has been from readers of the book who said that during the pandemic, in the beginning of it, how much this book helped them when they felt like they needed to make a shift in their life. And while the research and the work comes from college students, it's written for an audience of any age, any experience. And and so it was really a blessing. I didn't have the opportunity to do the promotion with it, like the in-person stuff, because of the pandemic. And so I appreciate you bringing it up.
Sure.
But it really was like, this is what God was calling me to do. And I'm very thankful to St. John's, because 2 years ago, they gifted all of the graduates with a copy of the book.
Wow.
And helping them as they went into the next chapter of their lives to be able to continue to ask themselves, who's God calling me to be? So that was a really great gift from them.
Well, and it's also a gift because it gave you a foundation for a book writing career. And exactly 2 years later, April of this year, you released another new book. This one is called Batter Up, Answering the Call of Faith and Fatherhood. That book sounds like it's right up our alley, meaning this Catholic Sports Radio community. Share with us about that one.
Oh, my goodness. This was so much fun to write. I was writing about the three things I love the most: God, baseball, and sports, and my family. And my second child, Lily, was born in May of 2020. So, all the craziness that was in our world and our lives at that point. And my wife was a hero for what she did and being able to bring Lily into the world. And I had been sitting with this idea of writing a book about fatherhood for some time. And I just wasn't sure where to go with it. And then during the pandemic in that first year, I was like, you know what, let me just write about this. And let me just try to intersect these three areas. And, the publisher of both these books is New City Press, and they're the Focolare community. And their focus is on unity, certainly in Christianity, but in all world religions. And it's focusing on how God loved us and how we're called to love others. And I wanted to use this book as a tool or an instrument to invite fathers, people who are called to that vocation. And I use it broadly, certainly in a more traditional sense like myself, but also the coaches, right? Those mentors, those who might not have any biological children or adopted children, but they're fathers who are taking young people under their wings and developing them, and not only in the sport, but in life. And that was the audience. That is the audience. And my hope is they would have a chance to better look at what they do and how they do it, and see it as a vocation, see it as a ministry, see it as what God is calling to do it. Every chapter is an inning, focusing on different aspects of fatherhood. And there's some difficult stuff there. I talk a little bit about mental health. I struggle with anxiety, and so that has a place in the book. We also had, in 2019, my wife had a miscarriage between the births of my first two daughters, and that was really difficult. And I didn't find anything in terms of resources that was helping me help my wife, right? Not only help my wife, but also help myself. As you mourn and you try to make sense of that. And it was really difficult for me. And I knew at that point that there was a need here to write about it and to try to provide something for fathers who might go through that in their lives.
Yeah.
Because certainly the attention has to go to the mother, and it
Yeah.
should. They're dealing with the physical, emotional, spiritual. But the father also is dealing with the emotional, the spiritual, the psychological to support their wife or the mother, and also to heal themselves. And so I have a chapter that focuses about that and gives that some space to look at. And I think we don't always talk about miscarriages in publicly, and I'm hoping that there are fathers who read it and it speaks to their heart and it helps them heal, as others help me heal as well.
Yeah, God bless you.
But that's the serious stuff. There's a lot of other beautiful, fun things in the book as well. And I talk about some games I went to and different moments of where sports was really the avenue of discovering God's love. And there's so much in it. Like one of the final chapters talks about I think it's a miracle in our society that we can gather tens of thousands of people in a stadium and they can get along. Right? You think about how divisive our world is.
For the most part.
But there's
along for the most part.
Incidents, right? But you can have people in this shared space cheering on a game. There's an investment in that. And we think of those big moments that happen in sporting events. Strangers start hugging each other, and there's a sense of our unity. And I think that there's hope. I believe there's hope that if we can do that there, we can do that in other parts of our lives where maybe we're not being so kind and caring to one another.
Yeah.
And that's how I think our challenge is saying, well, baseball or whatever sport you're watching, there is this sense of you're invested in this outcome of this game. But in life, if we can do a better job connecting with our spiritual selves and understanding the God that created us and the God that loves us, and if we can see that divine spark in one another, maybe there's hope that we can better not just coexist with each other, but better respect one another and love one another. And take it back to the sports field and the sports arena. That's where I think there's an opportunity from a coaching standpoint, from a parent standpoint, to be able to continue to model of how, yes, we're very competitive, we want to do well, but how do we model and also speak to that respect and that dignity that each person deserves?
Yeah, I love it. And folks, I will have a link on the show page for this episode at CatholicSportsRadio.net to the page on Amazon where you can order Jimmy's 2 books, although I'm also going to put a link to his website as well. And, of course, there are links there for both of his books. Jimmy, speaking of batter up, there's a fun story you have about the first home run you ever hit.
Yeah, so as I said before, I wasn't ever the best kid on the team. I love baseball, and I really tried hard, but I haven't had my hits, maybe a double if I got lucky if the outfielder misplayed it. But I never hit a home run. It's just something I never did, and I'm not fast either, so I never got an inside the park one. But when I was working at St. John's, and my wife and I started dating, and I should say that we met for the first time in the church on campus at St. John's University.
Wow.
So another reason how that university is so much a part of our lives. And there's a softball field near the residence halls, and we had this kind of fun game between administrators and public safety, other people who worked in residential life. And I don't know what overcame me that day, and Susie, my wife, was staying there, and I turned to her and I said, "This one's for you." And then I proceeded to hit a home run over the left field wall. And again, I don't know if the angel stepped in at that point and carried it through over the wall. And it was just this really beautiful moment. I don't think she was as impressed as I was. I was probably the most impressed person there. But I ended up reflecting on that, and when I worked for that Queens newspaper, I wrote an article about it, and then right before we got married, and just talked about how it was the most important home run I ever hit in my life. It was the only one I ever hit in my life, but it was one that I think was kind of born out of just my love for her, and God bless her, because she has put up with many sporting events and things. I have to tell you, we're big baseball fans, and when we first started dating, I would watch football, but I wasn't really that into it because I would often work a lot on Sundays and at the university. But as I've gotten older, I've gotten much more into football. And she'll say, we had a deal. Baseball all the time, but when football comes on, that's she's kind of adjusted to that, thankfully. And my daughters love watching sports, so that helps as well.
But stay on this topic, though, because one facet of your sports life that we have not talked about yet is what a passionate fan you are. Share with the audience about who your favorite team is and even the unique guest that you had at your wedding.
Yes. Yeah. So I am a big Mets fan. I should say it's in my blood. My father rooted for both the Mets and the Yankees, which I think shouldn't be allowed. But my grandfather, my dad's father, grew up a Brooklyn Dodgers fan. And when the Dodgers moved in 1957 to LA, he wouldn't root for the Yankees, and he just waited for National League Baseball to return, and then here came the Mets. And I also have some Mets fans on my mom's side as well. So it was kind of passed down to me. I was turning 4 when they won in '86, so that probably helped as well. And I've never seen them win. I don't remember that. So I've never seen the team win. I claim that my fandom with the Mets keeps me humble in life. I pray once before I go to heaven, God willing, I'll see them win. And it's just it's such a way for me to connect with people, to be with others. And I love going to a game and just sitting there and just taking it all in, and of course watching on TV. But when my wife and I got married at St. Thomas More Church, the church where we met at St. John's, after the wedding, we walk out and they typically would throw the rice or blow bubbles, and all of a sudden, hiding behind the bridal party, pops out Mr. Met. And my wife had surprised me by inviting him with a small fee to come to our wedding, and he took these photos with us. And I think my smile on my face was bigger than his. People who don't know, Mr. Met is the mascot of the Mets, and we have a deep love for each other. I think maybe me a little bit more toward him, and and it was just this great moment, and we have these incredible photos of us with Mr. Met in front of our church, and and I said we had 2 daughters. Our first daughter, her name is Shay. Named her partly because of Shea Stadium. And a really quick fun story. I begged Susie that when she was pregnant that we could name the child Shay. And she said if she comes out Irish looking and with red hair, we can name her Shay, which we didn't think was going to happen because yes, we have Irish blood, but we also have Italian and Turkish blood. And God bless her, she came out with red hair. And it's blonde and curly, but Susie thankfully let us name her Shay, and our second daughter is Lily. We didn't name her City after City Field. We didn't do that. Home of the Mets. But they're both big Mets fans, and they have to be. I said besides having a faith life, being Mets fans is really a very important thing to do.
Well, on that note, you've mentioned a couple times the children that you and your wife have. Let's close by having you share about your kids as well as the parish community that you are a part of.
Yeah, so we relocated during the pandemic, and we found a beautiful home at St. Patrick's in Smithtown, Long Island, and it's just a wonderful community, and that's where we worship, and we hope to be even more involved in the future. She's in first grade there, and then she does Little League baseball in the community out here, and so that's where we have the chance to. I've had a chance to coach and assist the head coach with that, and so much fun watching these 5 and 6-year-olds running around learning the game and building teamwork. I just smile the whole time, just being a part of it. And then she's also very involved in soccer league. My wife coached last year. I never grew up playing soccer, and so I'm learning with her, even watching the World Cup. And it's just again that whole idea of teamwork and seeing this next generation build these relationships. And then my daughter Lily is 2, and she plays a little on the side. Very, very into sports as well, and also it's the faith life. We pray together. We talk about God. We talk about the saints. Just in the beginning of November, Shay dressed up as St. Francis for the All Saints Day Mass at the school. And it was so much fun watching her put little birds on her shoulder, and she said a few words at church during the time for the homily, and just watching all these little kids. And I think it's a real blessing that we're a part of this faith community. I had that blessing as a kid to be a part of a parish and to be involved in that. really my whole life. And it was important to my wife and I that we also would have a parish life for our family and our children. And, I think parishes are so different from one another, and the church at large, and especially in this country, struggles with getting families involved. And I think sports offers a way to invite people in, to create community, but also it's all of us. It's certainly the priests and the teachers and the people involved in religious education, but it's also the parents and everyone involved to create a community and create a home.
Amen.
And so that's the challenge we all have. And the fruit of that work and the fruit of that labor is just an incredible lifelong gift for people.
No doubt.
Certainly for my family.
No doubt. Well, Jimmy, God bless you and your family. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed having you on Catholic Sports Radio. And again, congratulations on the book, Batter Up, Answering the Call of Faith and Fatherhood. I appreciate you making time to be on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much. This really was a great joy. And please be assured of my prayers for you in this ministry and the great ministry that you provide for our church and for our world. And it's really stories of inspiration that you invite into people's homes and into their hearts. So thank you for what you do and who you are.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot. Thank you. Folks, as a nod to the coaching that Jimmy does, and for that matter, you even heard him mention at the end that his wife does some coaching, I thought it would be fitting if on this week's episode we close with one of the prayers for coaches that comes from the National Catholic Coaches Association. So let's pray this together, of course, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. From 1 Corinthians 15, therefore, my dear brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the Lord's work, knowing that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Lord, it is so easy for me to lose perspective, to get focused on the little picture of my job rather than on the big picture of the work to which you have called me. Help me to persevere. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thanks so much for listening. This is Catholic Sports Radio. Find more at catholicsportsradio.net, as well as on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It is at Cath Sports Radio on all those, CATH, at Cath Sports Radio. I'm Bruce Wozniak, and remember, it's not whether you win or lose, it's that it's Jesus that you always choose.